What would happen if the US government tried to ban Bitcoin outright? What are the biggest risks that could derail Bitcoin's long-term success? How do Bitcoin's halvings impact its price cycles? And will this trend continue indefinitely? Now, could quantum computing pose a real threat to Bitcoin security in the future? Will Bitcoin mining ever become completely sustainable, or is energy consumption always going to be a challenge? Will nation states eventually adopt Bitcoin as their primary reserve asset? Yes is the answer. I think they will.
I'm Matthew Fraser, and this is Crypto Collective. After making millions with Amazon and e-commerce, I realized that if I was starting again today, crypto would be my first choice. I'm here to help you take your first steps and build real wealth. Ready to set yourself up for life? Let's go.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Crypto Collective. In today's episode, we're going to be doing Q&As from the members, and that includes from you. Let's get into it. All right, guys, the first question up is, what are the biggest risks that could derail Bitcoin's long-term success? This is an interesting question because, you know what, I've got this book right here in front of me. It's called The Bitcoin Standard. They cover things just like this. And I think, highly recommend the book, by the way. Absolutely essential reading for anyone getting into the Bitcoin space, whether you've been in it for a long time, you've never read it, or you're just getting into it. You must read. This is like the Bible of Bitcoin. But essentially, the things that could have derailed Bitcoin probably have surpassed. And the reason why is because of the network. There was a time in the very beginning when Bitcoin was just starting out, where there was minimal network. So let's just say, for example, there was 10 computers in the network. Now, you taking over 10 computers would be quite easy because there's only 10. Fast forward to today where there's, I don't know the number, but there would be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of computers within the Bitcoin network. So you trying to take over individually, or even as a company, as an attack network, to try and take over 1 million plus type of computers is basically impossible. And that said, all you would have to do is actually take over 51% of the network. So if I go back into the earlier scenario in the beginning of maybe being only 10, you would only have to take over 6 of the 10. Now, that way you could manipulate the Bitcoin network and alter the blockchain. And so now that's been and gone. So therefore, what is the biggest risk to Bitcoin would be things that are really just, what are the biggest risks to humanity? A meteorite hitting the globe and just wiping out the whole planet. I mean, but of course, if that happens, Bitcoin is the least of your problems. Next question, how do Bitcoin's halvings impact its price cycles? And will this trend continue indefinitely? Now, the previous Bitcoin halving was in about April of 2024 from memory. Now, what happens at that time is the amount of Bitcoin that can be mined out of the Bitcoin network reduces by half. So back before 2024, it was 900 Bitcoin per day. Today, it's 450 Bitcoin per day. And in approximately another 2 years' time, you'll be able to mine only 225 Bitcoin per day. Now, what we saw out of the previous halving, well, I can remember the time actually, as we were leading up to the previous halving, there was a lot of speculation that, hey, this halving is coming out, the amount of Bitcoin that you can mine is going to be reduced, so therefore reduce supply into the marketplace, and therefore the price is going to increase like overnight. And that just didn't happen. The price didn't spike the day after the Bitcoin halving. Now, I think in history, the price has continued to rise, okay? But you can't say it's because exactly of the Bitcoin halving date. Does the halving contribute towards the increase in value of Bitcoin over time? I would say yes. It's to do with the supply is decreasing, and also the demand for Bitcoin from retail, nation states now, and companies is also increasing. So it helps with keeping the price up because of the reduced supply over time. There's so much pressure now on the Bitcoin supply shock, okay? Meaning there's going to be so much buying pressure from all over the globe. And I think mainly from, can I say, nation states, because as we've just seen in recent days, Trump and his administration have just announced the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, commonly called now SBR. And what that means is they are going to be accumulating Bitcoin into their own strategic reserve, just like they do with things like oil. They'll have an oil reserve. Now, what's interesting though with this particular reserve is that they're not allowed to sell the Bitcoin. That's actually going to be codified into the orders. I'm not sure if it's going to law yet. So they will be accumulating and never selling, okay? Because there's actually no point in selling Bitcoin because the government doesn't actually even need to sell it. The first thing they're going to do though, by accumulating the Bitcoin, is grab all of the repossessed Bitcoin from criminals. They've got it in their own stockpile right now, and they're going to take that into their reserve. They're also going to be doing other things that don't require the printing of money and using taxpayers' funds to buy Bitcoin. What they're going to do is find other ways to accumulate Bitcoin. Now that could be, this is just speculation now, perhaps they sell part of their gold reserve because they have Fort Knox, which holds a whole stack of gold. Maybe they sell off a portion of the gold. Maybe they sell off all of the gold. Wouldn't that be something? Could you imagine? Because what's interesting about that is China has been accumulating gold for decades and decades. If America was to dump all of their gold onto the market, it would completely tank the price of gold. Okay, so that would ruin now other nation states that hold gold, especially China. Now, this has happened to China in the past because China used to accumulate silver and then the world moved to gold. So their silver reserve became, I don't want to say it's worthless, but it wasn't as sought after. Okay, it wasn't seen as like the ultimate hedge. So this could happen with, of course, gold. Now, other things that they could do, of course, would be the tariffs. Right? There's a lot of things happening right now with Trump and tariffs. Tariff money is now an extra source of income for the government that's not impeding on taxpayers. They could use the tariff money, and from a political point of view, it makes sense because Trump can come out and say, we're simply having other people, other nation states pay to buy the Bitcoin. Right? Perfect from a political standpoint. So I went a bit off track there, but that was regarding the Bitcoin halvings. Okay, next question is, could quantum computing pose a real threat to Bitcoin security in the future? And I was just listening to one of the experts on this just the other day to do with quantum computing. And the reason why there's a threat of quantum computing is the power in which it could solve puzzles, meaning passwords, your keys into your Bitcoin. The point that was made was that quantum computing probably doesn't have an impact on the Bitcoin network, right? It doesn't get hacked. What could be hacked though is individual wallets, okay? Now, if you knew though that quantum computers could hack your personal wallet or could hack other people's personal wallets, you may then think about dumping your Bitcoin. Now, if you think about dumping your Bitcoin, then probably somebody else is thinking about the same thing. That could create a cascade of a sell-off. So people are now going to get out of the Bitcoin space thinking that their personal or cold wallet storage is now compromised. I think that could happen, though I haven't heard anyone talking about that specifically. But that said, I think there's a bigger threat though than to Bitcoin. People talk about quantum computing and Bitcoin. What about quantum computing and the Defense Force? What about the nuclear codes? What about just the traditional banking sector? Why wouldn't a hacker use quantum computing to hack into just the banking system and siphon out cash? Because at the end of the day, it's really just digits on a screen. You know, why wouldn't they just put digits from the central bank computer or any bank computer onto your own personal computer, and then you cash out the actual cash itself? Maybe that's an option. The other things would be electricity, nuclear stations, gas. I mean, all these major type of infrastructure that could really upset nations by simply turning a switch. So I think that's a bigger problem than just Bitcoin, because the other thing to think about is, why would a hacker steal everyone's Bitcoin only to see the price of Bitcoin go down. It wouldn't make sense. And I'm told that in order to do a major hack in the Bitcoin network would cost billions of dollars. So therefore, you'd actually be better off to buy Bitcoin with your billions of dollars to push the price up, to take more Bitcoin out of the market. So that's my 2 cents on quantum computing. Next question, will nation states eventually adopt Bitcoin as their primary reserve asset? Yes is the answer. I think they will. Now, as I just touched on before, is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. You've got other nations though, that's just America, but other nations like El Salvador, Bhutan, they already accumulating Bitcoin like there's no tomorrow. And I'm sure now that El Salvador is going to have that as a reserve for their own country. So the short answer is yes, and I think a lot of countries will follow into the future. But like all things, it always takes a big player, like the biggest player in the market, like America, to lead the way. And I think there will be an arms race now on for Bitcoin, particularly between the major superpowers, USA, China, Russia, and potentially parts of Europe, probably the UK. Australia, forget about it. They're asleep at the wheel. They don't even know what's going on. Hey? They are so far behind when it comes to Bitcoin. Anyway, we'll see what happens.
Hey, just quickly, if you're ready to dive deeper into crypto and Bitcoin and build real wealth, join my free Crypto Collective community. It's where I share exclusive insights and strategies and live discussions to help you succeed, whether you're a beginner or scaling your portfolio. Click on the link in the description and join us today. Now back to the episode.
Next question is, how will Bitcoin adoption impact traditional banking and financial institutions over the next decade? Wow, this is a great question. So thank you for putting this one forward. And there's so much to it. Because what we've seen as of today is, and I just did an interview with 𝗕𝗤𝗧𝗖𝗢𝗍, who's the founder of the Australian Crypto Convention. He's a big player in the crypto space. He was even disappointed as to what's going on in the banking sector, meaning like, how can you as a investor, just a retail investor, get your cash into an exchange, okay? Because the normal way of doing it is you go into your Commonwealth bank account, for example, online, you transfer it over to an exchange like SwiftX. Now, the bank's really clamping down and making it very, very difficult to transfer money over. So that's the first thing that's a total pain in the ass. Now, I wonder if it's because the banks ultimately will start to custody Bitcoin. And I think they will, all right? I know that the word on the street is a couple of the major banks in Australia are already putting in the frameworks to custody Bitcoin. You've already got banks, major banks in the USA who have already come out and said, we will now start to custody Bitcoin. I saw another bank today, I think it was a bank in Spain, I think it was, who have just said they're now going to custody Bitcoin. So it's already happening amongst banks around the world. Australia doesn't have it as of today, but my conspiracy hat on is that they're making it very difficult for you to transfer money into an exchange. They will then bring out a policy that says, we will let you purchase Bitcoin through our bank, okay? And then we will hold the Bitcoin for you. So it's a shame on the banks, because what they're doing is they're removing control of your own money about where you can spend it, which I think is a travesty, because we want freedom of speech. We also want freedom of money and where we can spend it and who we give it to and who we don't give it to. I think the bank's going to make it so difficult that you're going to have to buy the Bitcoin through the bank and the Bitcoin will hold it for you. Now, for a lot of people, I think in Australia, they'll think that's great. They'll love it, okay? Because banks in Australia are well trusted. We don't put our money in the bank and think the Commonwealth Bank is going to steal it, right? There's no way we think that. We think we put the money in the bank and it's safe. And for all intents and purposes, it is safe, okay? The bank's not stealing your money. And I think that same mindset is going to roll over into Bitcoin. if the bank says, hey, we'll hold the Bitcoin for you, you don't even have to worry about it, okay? We'll protect it for you. It's here with us, okay? You're gonna think, great, I don't have to hold it now. I don't have to worry about self-custody or cold storage. The bank's looking after it for me. So I think there's two ways to look at that. One is there's more control now with the banks. Two is it's now easy for consumers, right? And they do that through ease, okay? It's like when there was talk about the central bank digital currency. We'll make it easy for you. You don't even have to worry about it. We'll just make everything digital. You don't want to have to walk around carrying cash, that old clunky thing. So there's that. Now, on top of that, let's say the banks are now holding your Bitcoin. You'll now want to go and get a loan to buy a house. And what they will do is they'll say, well, look, we've already got your Bitcoin. What we'll do is we'll lend you some money secured against the Bitcoin. So there's a whole raft of lending measures that will come into place too. And maybe they'll give you a return on it. Maybe they'll say, look, we'll hold your Bitcoin. We'll give you 5% per annum, for example. That might be something as well. All right, great question. Next question is, what are the most overlooked risks of self-custodying Bitcoin? Good question. At face value, we think, okay, we're going to just self-custody the Bitcoin, no problem. But I mean, even I've gone through this thought process about how am I going to protect my Bitcoin? Now, I'm just going to throw in something here right now. I'm partnered with the Bitcoin Way, and the Bitcoin Way company has actually helped me get over this exact problem, which is thinking about custodying and protecting your Bitcoin, okay? Now, you'll find the links to that company in the show notes. Make sure you reach out to them for a free 30-minute call, and they can help you protect your Bitcoin. But one of the things I've done is they helped me set up a cold storage, and it wasn't just using Trezor, it was a whole next level. I'm using cold wallet that is wireless, right? Doesn't even connect to the computer, right? So I have that, what they call air-gapped. I'm also using my own node in my house, right? Which is the blockchain is running on my own node in my house, which means I'm essentially a self-sovereign person. I'm like a bank, yeah? And I can verify the transactions myself through my own wallet. Now, the next thing from that is you then need to set up your own password account, right? And they've helped me set up that. Then you now have to think about your partner or your wife or leaving it. So if something happens to myself or my wife, do my children now have access to the Bitcoin? So all these things can go through, the Bitcoin Way can go through with you to help you protect your wealth. It's so important, right? Because even if you think, oh, look, I've only got $20,000 worth of Bitcoin, it's not a big deal. What is that going to be worth in 20 years' time? Okay, in 10 years' time, it could be worth millions and millions and millions. I'm talking tens of millions in 20 years' time. So it now becomes worthwhile protecting today. So get onto it. Okay, next question. Will Bitcoin mining ever become completely sustainable, or is energy consumption always going to be a challenge? Okay, well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. I do know, for example, that there's a lot of sustainable practices being taken place in Europe who do Bitcoin mining. And just to give an exact example of that was there's a Bitcoin mining facility, and the problem is, or one of the benefits, I guess, if you're living in a cold area, is it produces a lot of heat. So what this company's been able to do is to take that heat and pump it back into a building, right? So the Bitcoin mine, and they're actually selling the heating to the building. So the building now doesn't have to pay for gas to heat the building or any other type of heating elements. And so it's essentially now paying for itself, and it's a sustainable way of using the heating. Now, there's some countries and some companies who adopt solar panels, for example. They're actually based out in the desert of all places. So they might use wind technology or solar technology to help power some of these Bitcoin mining facilities. What role will Bitcoin play in global geopolitics as countries increasingly explore digital currencies? Wow, this one is very, very deep. I think fundamentally, Bitcoin is a source of good. I think that if everybody in all countries move to a Bitcoin standard, I think it will start wars, etc. Conflict will start to diminish, because you won't be able to go into a country, for example, if Bitcoin is the thing that people want, You can't go and invade a country to steal their Bitcoin. If they've got oil, you can, right? But Bitcoin, you can't just walk in and steal the Bitcoin. And so I think fundamentally, Bitcoin is a reason for good. I think the more countries that hold it will be for the best. And look, let's just see how that plays out. But that's my sense on things. Next question is, could Bitcoin's volatility ever stabilize enough to be a true unit of account? There's vitality in volatility. You need volatility in the market. And I tell you what is volatile is cash, the fiat standard. It has, don't quote me here, but it's something like over the last 100 years, the value of cash has diminished by something like 99%. So that's pretty bad. Yeah. Whereas Bitcoin has increased. Okay. Now, just in the last year, over 2024, it increased by 120%. Right. So it's going up while cash value is going down. And so, yes, at the moment, you do see volatile, so if you put it that, spikes up and down. When people talk about volatility, they normally think about it dropping. Okay. But volatility also means it increases. So for example, if it increases in a single day by 20%, that's volatile. But that's a good thing. And that's why you've got to be in the market of Bitcoin, because the numbers are that something like 5 times in the year that the market increases. And if you're not in it over those 5 particular, I think it's 5 to 10 days of the year that actually goes up. But if you're waiting for that one day, one of 5 to 10 days of the year to get into the market, you'll miss out, because by the time you've thought about it, it's over. So you've got to be in it to win it. And the best thing to do with Bitcoin is actually nothing. You just buy it and do nothing. I know, seems simple, right? But when it's volatile to the downside and it drops, let's say 20%, I haven't seen it drop 20% in a day, but I mean, I noticed in recent time, it's dropped 28% over the last, say, 2 months or so. So people are thinking they've got to get out. Okay. But as I say, don't put money into the Bitcoin market that you need to pay the rent with, right? Just put it in there, forget about it. It's like, think of it like superannuation. Once your money goes into superannuation, you never think about, oh, now I've got to take that money back out, right? And your superannuation could actually go backwards, okay? But you never think, oh, I've got to go take the money out of superannuation, okay? So unless you've got a self-managed super, of course, right? So the best thing to do is do nothing. If a major global recession hits, how do you think Bitcoin will react compared to traditional assets? What we've seen even in just recent months is that the Bitcoin price is correlated to global macro conditions. So when there's fear in the market with stocks, there's also fear in the market with Bitcoin, with not just, I guess, with institutions, but also, retail investors. So they're looking to take money out. And we did hear recently that Warren Buffett, for example, actually sold millions, I think it was hundreds of millions of dollars. I think he had about $300 million of cash just sitting on the sideline. He sold out. And this was months ago. And everyone was speculating, why is he doing that? Does he know something that we don't know? So what we now know today, though, is that the stock market has gone down a lot. It could go down even more, maybe up to another 10% from today's low. The Bitcoin price could go down even more. As we record today, it's sitting at $78,000. It could drop down to 72. That's definitely possible. But if you're someone that's just hearing this now, and that news is still current, would you not buy at 78 because you think it's going to drop to 72? Or should you just buy at 78 today and know that you got in the market at 28% discount from its all-time high? Now, it's very, very difficult for you to catch the exact moment that it gets to the low of this particular dip. Okay, it's almost impossible. So if it's close, great, just take it. No, when the price gets back to $120,000, you're not going to care whether you paid $72,000 or $78,000 for the price of the Bitcoin. Okay, so get in while it's cheap. Back to recession though. So Bitcoin is impacted by macro conditions. However, what generally happens during a recession is the government starts to print money, okay? Unemployment goes up, they're giving out more money. They want to start stimulating the economy to get more money flowing. And then what happens is then risk on assets start to increase because now more people have more money and it goes up. I also just want to take you back to just recent years, because when we saw the scamdemic happen in 2020 odd, there was a huge crash, like a major crash. Everything plummeted, including Bitcoin. But what happened? The government came out, they printed a shit ton of money, and Bitcoin went up. Now, it wasn't just Bitcoin, house prices, etc., all went through the roof, and we then saw all-time highs. So Michael Saylor always says, Bitcoin loves chaos. A recession is chaos. Bitcoin loves chaos. So guys, this question is, what would happen if the US government tried to ban Bitcoin outright? Well, I think that question has been squashed, right? Because the US currently is not looking to ban Bitcoin. Now, could the US government ban Bitcoin in the future? Hey, anything could happen, right? We could get some crazy left-wing tyrannical leader and all bets are off, right? And by that time, you could even see that the government has accumulated so much Bitcoin that they're holding all the Bitcoin. But deep down, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think the cat's out of the bag now. The other thing to think about too is that China banned Bitcoin. Okay, China's banned Bitcoin, I think it's about 3 times over the past few years. And when China banned Bitcoin, there was a drop in the market, but then it bounced back. Okay. And the great thing about Bitcoin is it's decentralized, meaning not one company, not one person, and not one nation state controls Bitcoin, right? It's the freedom money of the world. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. Thank you much for joining me on this Q&A. Appreciate you sending in those questions. If you've got any more questions, either put them in the chat, DM me, however it is, get them to me, and I'll answer those in the next episode. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Crypto Collective. If you've enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your support is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. You can also find more of me at I'm Matthew Fraser on all social media platforms.